Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome to our Penn State Visitors Edition for this week. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Here with us in just a few minutes will be the radio play-by-play voice of Penn State football, Steve Jones. First, my view from Section 17, and a few thoughts from James Franklin. Well, in these times, recording a show can be quite the adventure. The news, and you know what news I'm talking about, changes from minute to minute. So as of Monday afternoon, as I prepare to get this show up, here is the latest. Reports have surfaced, though without many details, that a former employee at a Big Ten football program said it was his job to steal signs, adding he was given details from multiple league schools to compile a spreadsheet of play-calling signals used by Michigan last year. The AP reports the employee said he recently shared the documents, which showed the Wolverines signs and corresponding plays, as well as screenshots of text message exchanges with staffers at other Big Ten schools with Michigan. The spreadsheet was compiled with details from a handful of coaches and programs across the Big Ten. The AP added that the alleged actions by conference schools potentially violate the Big Ten sportsmanship policy, which could lead to punishment by the commissioner's office. As they say, stay tuned, this will be a developing story. Later on Monday, Action Network's Brett McMurphy reported Michigan has received notice of allegations from the Big Ten, but not what penalties might be administered. As previously reported, U of M is prepared to fight any penalties in support of due process. Amidst all this, we have a football game to play Saturday, and it is a big one. So let's turn our attention to that. At his Monday presser, James Franklin talked about the Michigan offensive line and our running backs.
You know, with them offensively, I just think they do a really good job of getting a hat on a hat. So a really good job of IDing the front, being able to get their being able to get their six blockers on our six most dangerous defenders. And I think Corum's got the ability to have tremendous vision and balance, and behind the line, because they're able to get a hat on a hat, he's patient. And then once he does decide to go, he's got the ability to burst through the hole. Even though he's an undersized guy, he's a powerful guy, and he's always falling forward. And then, obviously, they got to change a pace back as well, who's made some huge plays in the passing game and is explosive in Donovan. So they got two really good backs. They got experienced offensive line. They've done a good job being aggressive each year in the transfer portal on the offensive line. So they've been able to bring in experienced guys. I think the two guys they brought in, one was a captain at Stanford and one was a captain at Arizona State. So they got veteran guys in that room, whether it's their own guys or guys that they've gone out and gotten.
Franklin said he's seen improvement from JJ this year, but he and the offense really haven't been challenged yet.
Yeah, I think he's just a more experienced player. He's always been able to make plays with his feet, but he's just improved, kind of well-rounded. He's throwing for a higher completion percentage. He's doing a great job of protecting the football. He can extend the play and make big-time throws. I think the biggest thing with them is they really have not been challenged. They've had really good game control on offense and defense. They're usually ahead on the scoreboard for the most part, and they're usually ahead of the sticks on offense and defense. And when you're able to do that, then you're putting your quarterback or your guys in a very advantageous position as well. So, that game control will be an important part of this game.
Coach said he's looking forward to the noon kick time because he thinks the crowd will be caffeinated and on a sugar buzz.
And I actually think sometimes the 7 o'clock games, the whiteouts and things like that, they can be a little sleepy. It's late at night, guys are tired. The 12 o'clock game, I think, is going to be a much better environment because between the coffee, Dunkin' Donuts coffee, and then between the sugar from the donuts, our fans will be ready to go. We'll be in that stadium early because we're a morning group anyway. So it's going to be ideal, but I hope that the environment will also be something that's going to be difficult and cause some challenges, because when you can get penalties and get people behind the sticks, they have not had to play that way a whole lot this year. So that'll be a big part in the game.
He also mentioned he's focused on film right now, not the controversy swirling around Michigan and the Big Ten.
I'm focused on all the stuff I see on film. That's what we're focused on, is all the stuff that we see on film, their players, their scheme, all the stuff. When I say see on film, what we see on the coach's copy of the film, the stuff that's going on between the sidelines, the 53 and a third, that's what we're focused on.
My guest today says he sees Saturday's game as a defensive battle, one that could come down to the last possession. Joining us next is the radio play-by-play voice of Penn State football, Steve Jones. So stay with us. Joining us on the Visitors Edition of our show as we get ready for a big game in Happy Valley is the radio play-by-play voice of Penn State football, Steve Jones. Welcome back, Steve.
Mike, it's always great to be with you.
Well, Steve, I was able to see bits and pieces of Saturday's win over Maryland. I have to say that was as good as I've seen Penn State look this year. It was complimentary football. Great effort, wasn't it?
Best all-around game they've played this season. They were able to get out of the gate against Maryland, which is a team, Mike, that you put them on their script. They usually script the first 12 to 15 plays, and they're really successful at it. They had scored on their opening drive of the season, all touchdowns, 5 of the 8 games this year going into the game. And Penn State stopped them on the opening drive, and then Penn State scored on its opening drive. And you felt like that set the tone for the entire day. Penn State was able to stop them early, and they kept getting stops as the game went. And really, if it wasn't for a series of penalties, which would be the negative in the game for Penn State, they may have shut Maryland out. I mean, that's how well they played in the game. And then offensively, they just had a really good rhythm, a good mix between run and pass, and it was one of the better games that Drew Aller has played this season.
Drew Aller was 25 of 34, 4 TDs. Again, this was as good as I've seen him look so far this year. He was just really sharp, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. He was accurate with the football, Mike, and that was a big part of it for Penn State. The fade he throws in the corner to Dante Cephas, you can't throw it better than that. Then he had to improvise on a touchdown pass to Theo Johnson. That worked out really well. but that was his ability to see the field on that one. Then the touchdown pass he threw to Tyler Warren was one where it had to be an absolute dart, and it was. And so those are all three different types of throws that he made during the course of the game. And when you see a quarterback doing that, JJ's like that, because, I mean, JJ can make every throw. Now you're seeing a guy that really is settled in and playing good, solid quarterback.
And, when you look back at the beginning of the season, the expectations were so high for Drew, and he's a kid loaded with talent. We've all known that, and we've seen it. But do you think he's at this point of the year starting to settle in now and coming into his own in a way?
I think so, because, let's look at JJ, because JJ's having a great season, right?
Mm-hmm.
For Michigan, JJ McCarthy. When JJ first got integrated into what Michigan was going on, Cade McNamara was still there, and they were able to feed him a little bit here and a little bit there. And he had that tough game at Michigan State in the middle of that. And those are part of the growing pains for any quarterback. To suddenly get in there and then you make a mistake. And he threw, JJ, if I remember, threw an interception in the end zone in that game. And you fight your way through it, but in the end, you learn from it. You end up being better for it. So here's now JJ McCarthy into his second full season as the starter, third year overall. And you can see the efficiency with which he plays because the game is slowed down. Drew was able to get into bits and pieces of games last year, 9 of them. And I think it helped him in terms of starting the season. And here they are now through game 9. And you really feel like, especially in the last 5 quarters, that the game has really slowed down for him.
Mm-hmm.
And because it means he has more options out there because he can scan the field with more efficiency.
Well, Steve, the only other full Penn State game I got to see this year was Ohio State, and the passing game struggled that day. I'm sure a lot of that had to do with the Ohio State defense, but the Nittany Lions have some guys who are very talented on the outside, like Dante Cephas, Keandre Lambert-Smith, who has over 50 catches, and Theo Johnson at tight end, who is outstanding, an NFL guy. So Drew has a lot of weapons he can utilize, doesn't he?
He does, and the other guy's Tyler Warren, who actually leads the team in touchdown catches with 6. So they can run those 2 tight ends out there, and Penn State will go with that personnel a good portion of the time. And then there's the running backs in the pass game, Mike. I mean, when you look at Michigan, for example, Donovan Edwards is an exceptional receiver out of the backfield.
Mm-hmm.
Not good. He's exceptional. Well, Nicholas Singleton worked really hard in the offseason at being a better receiver. In fact, did a lot of workouts with the wide receivers. Katron Allen was already a good receiver out of the backfield. Well, the fact is now you can use him as a receiver. He's reliable, and that puts him in the open field to make plays. And one of the key plays in the win over Indiana was a 28-yard pass play over the middle to Nicholas Singleton. So the running backs also are a critical part to what's going on here because Drew doesn't always have to take it and load it up and fire it deep. He'll check it down and allow those backs to make some plays.
Let's talk about those 2 running backs you just mentioned. In the rushing game, Katron Allen, he picked up 91 yards on Saturday. His running mate, Nicholas Singleton, outstanding. They're both over 500 yards rushing on the season, almost even on carries, I think. I think Katron has 119, Singleton 124. Pretty impressive duo back there, isn't it?
Last year, they went through the entire season, Mike, and they were separated by 11 carries. And it's just organic. It's just the way it works out. The last 2 games, though, Allen has been the guy that stylistically has fit how Penn State needed to play in the game. He's more of a jump cut, power, quick guy inside. Singleton's the home run hitter. And that's been the frustrating part here at Penn State, at least for the fan base, is that he hasn't gone out and hit the home run yet this year after hitting a whole bunch of them last year. He's had to go with quickness into the hole and a lot more power this year because of the way it's played out. But it's really a nice compliment that you have 2 different styles of running back. That way it depends on which guy has the hot hand, and you can get to the 4th quarter and you go with the guy whose style is working the best.
Well, we're sort of going through the same thing here where, last year we broke a lot of big ones with Blake and Donovan. Not happening so far this year, and, most fingers point to the offensive line. So I know before the season, if a lot of writers and analysts had questions, it was about how good is this Penn State offensive line. So what would you say about that group?
Well, Saturday was their best game, I thought. I thought they played really well. I mean, it wasn't until the last 5 minutes of the game they gave up a tackle for loss in the game. So you're coming off that kind of performance. Olu Fashanu is a top 5 NFL pick. All right, at left tackle. Simple as that, and he's just that good. Now the other guys they've had injuries at the left guard spot. Landon Tangwall's out for the year. J.B. Nelson missed a couple of games, so we're down to the third guard at one point. But it seemed like they were more cohesive in this game, and I thought they were actually decently cohesive, especially in the second half of the Indiana game. So I think you're starting to see signs that they're playing better. But remember, I think if you look at the games, Mike, with Michigan and Penn State, I've seen similarities. People are loading up the box against them. And that's what's happening for Blake and for Donovan and Khalil and everybody there, that people are loading the box against them. They're putting 7, occasionally sneaking up an 8th guy. And the same thing's happening with Penn State. They're trying to make Drew Aller beat them. So they've been putting 6 to 8 guys in the box, and thus they're taking away as many running lanes as possible and trying to outnumber you in the box. And I think similarities between the two teams as to how they've been defended.
And I think you're right about that. But after 9 games, most teams, most staffs have a pretty good feel for what their offense can and cannot do. If there are worries with this Penn State offense, what would they be at this point?
Well, I think people are waiting to see if they can hit big plays. They've been able to put together the time-consuming drives. And I'll give you an example. I think Penn State has, 48 scoring drives this season? Mm-hmm. I would say in the past, 40 out of the 48 would have been drives of 4 minutes or less. This team, it's 27 out of the 48 drives have been 4 minutes or less. And I think that's what the issue has been. They've been able to take time off the clock, which has been good for the defense. But at the same time, people are looking for that home run play, that big play that kind of breaks the game open for them. And I think that's been the primary complaint about the Penn State offense to this point.
Flipping it over to the defensive side, Steve, I think we've all seen enough to know this is an elite unit. If I had to single out one guy on that unit that's just fun to watch from a football perspective, it's going to be number 11, Abdul Carter. He is a dominant, amazing athlete to watch, isn't he?
He is. Abdul Carter is explosive. There's no question about that. And I feel that for him, I know I've said this about a couple of guys already. I felt Saturday was his best game. You could see right away the burst, the angles. Sometimes he'll have burst and he doesn't take the right angle, or he'll overrun a play. This time he played with a little more patience to go with the burst, and I thought that made a big difference. But he's a dynamic player who can also drop into coverage and make plays. He already has an interception this year. He should have had one on Saturday as well. It's a nice compliment to have Mr. Reliable on the other side next to him, and that's Curtis Jacobs, because Curtis Jacobs is a fourth-year player that very quietly has had an outstanding season. And, the stats aren't going to be there because they're not playing 4 quarters of defense in many of the games. And that's why I always say about the really good teams, Mike, the really good teams aren't in close games. Okay?
Yeah.
You're really good. You're not in a close game. All right? That's what, and then you get into the big games, and those are going to be the close games along the way. But that's what's happened for the most part with Penn State. I mean, Penn State had their Indiana game like Florida State had their Boston College game. Everybody has a game like that.
Well, we hear a lot about Michigan's front seven here, but that Penn State group, they're as good as any in the country, aren't they?
You have Chop Robinson off the edge who can be dynamic. Denai Dennis Sutton off the edge can be dynamic. But then there's this guy, watch for number 20, Adisa Isaac. Quietly goes about his business. And then you look at the stat sheet, and who leads the team in sacks? He does.
Yeah.
Who leads the team in tackles for losses? He does. Oh, and by the way, if you want to run a zone blitz, he's the best of the defensive ends of dropping into a spot and playing it. Jack Ham marvels at that all the time on the broadcast because Jack obviously understands better than anybody in the planet the proper depth of a drop of a linebacker, and he's watching a defensive end do that. What's really helped, too, is the secondary is really good. They'll play 6 defensive backs in certain sub-packages. Johnny Dixon and Kalen King have been outstanding at the corners, and it's made a difference. And Daquan Hardy is quietly having an excellent season as the slot corner, as well as being obviously a dynamic punt returner.
Well, there are 3 tests left for that Penn State defense, and you've seen a lot of great ones in your years calling the action. In my lifetime, I've seen a lot of good Penn State defenses. Did this defense have a chance to rank up there with the great ones in the end?
It's one of the best ones Penn State's had. Now, obviously, the one like Jack Ham played on in 68 and 69 is legendary.
Oh, yeah.
The defense of the 86 national championship team was legendary. even in tough years in the early 2000s, Penn State had one of the best defenses in the country. It just didn't have an offense to go with it. But this is one of the better ones. Saying one is the best is always a difficult thing to do because I think, what you give to one, you take away from somebody else. But this could be, when you're making an argument, okay, give me the best 10 defenses in the history of Penn State football. This could be one of those that would, at least to this point, through 9 games, and we'll see how the final 3 play out. To this point, you could at least make an argument they could be among those 10.
Well, Steve, if Michigan fans are happy about one thing, it's this is not a whiteout game at night. We have we have not fared very well in those games, but still, these two teams have played some high-stake games over the years. But this is the biggest in a long time, isn't it?
It really is because you're coming down the stretch. It's not an early season game. This has all the feel of a game that has college football playoff implications to it for both teams along the way. So when you get to this point of the season and you have a high stakes game like this is the kind of game. This is why players wanted to go to Michigan. This is why players wanted to go to Penn State. You want to play in big games like this. And that's, I think, and for fans, with all due respect, I'm sure it was exciting on Parents' Weekend to go to the Purdue game, but let's face it, hey, this is a little different ball game.
Well, since Sunday morning, a lot of the media folks have been breaking down and predicting and weighing in on this matchup Saturday, and just about everything I've read has this as a very close game in the end. If both teams bring their A games, and you can't discount turnovers. This really looks like two really evenly matched teams, doesn't it?
Well, look at the game 2 years ago. That's different personnel, but it ended up being 21-17. I mean, that could be the same kind of game that we see on Saturday. Two really good defenses. Field position could play a role. You properly mentioned giveaway, takeaway, critical along the way. Yeah, you're going to have to be good in special teams. And that's, when you look at, the last 6 meetings between the two teams, Penn State's won 3, Michigan's won 3. Okay. So now you're going to go out and play on Saturday and find out which team, in essence, advances in this thing.
The weather could be a factor, too. I haven't taken a peek at the forecast yet, so that's always key.
Should be good. Should be good. You'll need a parka, but it's not going to be below. It's not going to be freezing. It's going to be in the 40s, and I think the weather's going to be good enough. And the field here, as is outstanding.
Oh, yeah.
So this might be the best field in all of college football. It's unbelievable.
Well, final question before we let you get away, Steve. We all know about the controversy that's swirling back here around Michigan. Uh-huh. At this point, we don't even know if Jim's going to be on the sidelines this Saturday. But from a Penn State perspective, and for Coach Franklin, a win keeps them squarely in the playoff picture. So this is absolutely a huge game for the program and the fan base, isn't it?
Well, everything that's happening with Michigan right now is outside of the game. Outside of the game for this moment, mm-hmm. Everything's about the game. I mean, that's what you have to lock in on the game. I know in the pregame show that I'll do on Saturday for Penn State football, I'm sure Jack Ham and I will get asked about it, but we're going to take the tact of, hey, let's talk about the game. Okay? You can't do anything about that other stuff. All right? So let's talk about the game because the game means everything. The other issues will take care of themselves in due time.
I agree. The game means everything, and Michigan and Penn State, the fan base, ready to rock on Saturday. We're all looking forward to it. It's going to be a good one, I think. Here with us today has been the radio play-by-play voice of Penn State football, Steve Jones. Steve, always great having you with us, and we look forward to the next visit. Enjoy Saturday.
Sounds great, Mike. Always great being with you.
On Quick Hits today, as I mentioned at the top of the show, what was breaking news 30 minutes ago is old news when it comes to this Big Ten confrontation with Michigan. As of now, we have until Wednesday to respond to the notice of allegations, so it should be a crazy week. On Thursday's Game Day show, my scheduled guest is Chris Ballas, but as most of you know, he has been front and center covering this story for The Wolverine and The Wolverine on 3. So if Chris can break away from all of that and give us a few minutes, he'll be here. If not, we'll grab one of our other writers or media personalities. That will do it for our Penn State Visitors Edition this week. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. Don't forget to join us on Thursday. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue.
Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!